Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This episode is very important because we will discuss on IoT, 5Gs and edge computing. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Dr. William, Professor Donald, Mr. Adam, and our friend, Mr. Dan. So I want to start from Professor Edward because this modern technology right now is very popular, especially the population from the Asia Pacific. They love to learn more about this 5G network and IoT. You are running a policy development organization. So how do you want to analyze today's topic, and what the
Well,
great example you have?
yeah, well, this is indeed a good topic. And by the way, I'm sorry that the technology we're talking about has not caught up with the new computer I just purchased. The camera doesn't seem to be on right now, but hopefully for the next show it will be. And I have to get off early anyway. But this is a very important issue because all of the technologies we've talked about in previous shows, in one sense, come together in the Internet of Things. Yeah, we talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about remote sensing. We talk about Wi-Fi and this sort of thing. The Internet of Things is based on the notion or the fact that by 2030 there's going to be something like 500 billion sensors blanketing the earth, everything from thermostats to cameras to microphones to weather monitoring equipment. To medical monitoring equipment, to monitors in your appliances, in your refrigerator, in your lights. You'll have intelligent houses and these kinds of things. This is the Internet of Things, and it's made possible because of advanced communications technology. 5G is what we're talking about today. And by the way, I'm going to call your attention. This might be something for a future show. There's a very good report out from Samsung on 6G, the next hyper-connected experience for all. Because while 5G is here and it's being integrated certainly and put up in the United States, 6G is not that far behind, which is going to provide even more incredible capacity. By the way, we want to talk, and I'm sure my colleagues here, when I get off, will talk a little bit more about edge computing. Edge computing is kind of real-time monitoring, which you have to do, for example, in stores and certain kinds of commercial and industrial ventures. I kind of think of it this way. In the 1980s, in the late 1970s and 1980s in the United States, we had a very important transition from the normal way of doing inventory to what's called just-in-time inventory. Here in the United States, we had lots of regulations on trucking. So, for example, a truck might have to go from Chicago to Denver, which are thousands of miles away, carrying a truckload of materials, offload them in Denver, and then go back with an empty truck because of a lot of this really bad regulations. What happened in the late 70s and then early into the 80s was you got just-in-time inventory, meaning that instead of tying up space and capital and keeping huge warehouses of material, a business was able to basically order stuff and have the materials, for example, the inputs into their production process come in just in time, saving money, saving warehouse space, etc. You might want to think of what we were just discussing, edge computing, as kind of a internet version of just-in-time inventory. That's kind of the way I think about it. So this is a very exciting, and again, this is going to be the Wi-Fi and the Internet of Things is going to be pulling together and creating more capacities with the Internet of Things. This is a very exciting topic, and indeed, I think a lot of the Asian Pacific countries can, in maybe ways, leapfrog some of the Western countries in developing these capacities. And so, again, as I always in my discussions of saying, we welcome entrepreneurs to think of new ways to use these incredible technologies.
Thank you. because of subject matter, I want to give chance to Professor Donald because he is from innovative industry. Then I come to Dr. William. Professor Donald, how do you want to give some good example, especially when we are developing our curriculums and everything for the university students? So how you can give them some industrial example for best uses of IoT, benefits of 5G and edge computing? Can you unmute, please, Professor?
I want to just elaborate on what Edward said so that we can be clear of what we're talking about. 5G is only partially implemented in the United States, basically. And the reason is because the extent of a 5G tower is about 1,500 feet, which is 5 to 10 times as much as a Wi-Fi router, but not a whole heck of a lot more than a Wi-Fi router. So when you in order to get 5G to work, you have to put lots and lots and lots of antennas around. I was reading that one company is actually putting antennas underneath manhole covers because that would allow you to be in the street. So just think you're driving down the road and you want to have 5G in your car, because one of the things that 5G is hopefully going to be useful for is self-driving cars, because you won't need traffic signals, because the super fast connection with low latency. Latency is the amount of time that it takes for your signal to get to wherever it is and back. And that, if it's as much as 40 milliseconds, which is kind of common for current Wi-Fi technology, you wind up, I mean, it can go down to a couple of milliseconds if you have a good enough connection, but basically that's dozens and dozens and dozens of feet for your car to even become aware that it needs to stop and be able to start stopping. So 5G technology is going to be great for that, but then you have to consider you're driving down the road, and every 1,500 feet at the most, you're going to have a tower. I mean, if you visualize two circles, if they're like that, then there's these gaps. So you're going to have lots and lots and lots of these things everywhere for them to start working. And I have 5G on my phone, but it doesn't really do 5G except in a few places. In the United States, there's maybe 10 cities that have really started to commit to 5G. But in hotels and stores and things like that, you can sometimes get 5G, which is because they have their own broadcasting. Now, edge computing, I also want to say, is moving the data and the computation outside to the edge. And the way computers work is they have a thing called an operating system, and what the operating system does is sit between the applications and the hardware so that it can protect the hardware from applications. So somebody can't write a malicious application that goes in and changes somebody else's program or changes. And it also sequences things, because two people are using the same disk drive on a multi-user system, or two applications on your Windows 10 system are using the same disk drive. It has to sort it out so that they're not writing at the exact same time, so they don't write over each other and create problems. And that's what the operating system does. It used to be that a program was one big chunk. So you'd load the entire program in, run the program, or the operating system would run, and then it'd finish. But as time went on, we managed to start breaking the programs down into little functional pieces. And on Linux, they're called tasks. And so with edge computing, what we managed to do is to run some of these tasks on remote computers, so that when you ask for something to get done, rather than it having to come through the wires all the way back to a central computer, it can run the part of the program or all of it on these computers on the edge, but yet all of them know what each other are doing. And that also allows you to put disk space there. So when you're trying to access a file, it may come originally from a central computer, but a copy of that file is made at the edge. So you can get that copy, and it's much, much faster than you would otherwise. I'm going to say one other thing, and we'll talk about this all later, or I'll talk about maybe even answer your question better. But the 5G towers need to be hooked up to each other. And the way that they're hooked up with each other is optical fiber. But the whole idea that these 5G towers are just going to get put up there with no connection to anything is not true. It's an incredible, massive infrastructure thing that has to be done. And in order to get the kind of speeds you're talking about, you have to have a connection between these that's super fast. And that's what optical cable does. But it's got the same problems as other telecom, which is you're going to have to dig through somebody's property to put that there. And property can be extremely expensive. I mean, the cost of putting in these systems is really more about the right-of-ways and property that it takes to be able to do that. So it might be better in an easier in an authoritarian country where they just say, we're going to do this and tough luck if you don't like it. But the United States, it's a lot more difficult to do. So that's the technical infrastructure, and then we can talk about it later.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. William, after a long time, you joined World Talent Economy Forum. So I know that you are a policy consultant. How we can develop better policy for IoT, 5G, and edge computing?
Well, first, I want to say hello to all my colleagues. I've certainly missed all of you. And thank you, Dr. Sharif, for having me back. It's been an eventful time period since we last spoke. I guess I'd like to begin by doing this. Both of my colleagues, Donald and the other gentleman, certainly described two aspects of our conversation today. First, the Internet of Things, which is obviously a separate subject, and 5G. We're talking about them together because they indeed go together. But I guess for our audience, just to make clear, there are two separate things. The Internet of Things is really, the way we ought to think about it is it's a worldwide information infrastructure. Because what we're doing is we're collecting information from specific items that we tag either with an RFID chip or some other type of electric tag, whether it's a UPC code or as such. Now, 5G, on the other hand, is how the information is transferred. So it's the highway, so upon which all the information goes. Now, I had, look, in the early days, I could never understand when people would say 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G. But in order for our audience, rather to break it down, it's simply this. It's the progression of our ability to transfer information. For example, when people say 1G, what that meant was that the information that we were able to transfer essentially was analog voice information. It was limited, but it was helpful and was obviously something that we didn't have before. 2G turned that into digital voice, so we were able to transfer that. 3G allowed us to add media data content, so it would be voice and data. And essentially 4G made it faster, but 5G is offering a massive super highway that we can then take all that information that we collect from the Internet of Things and transfer it from one point to the other. So with that basic understanding, earlier when the guest talked about the idea of 500 billion sensors, what we have to understand is what my colleague was describing was that a sensor is each individual thing. So like, for example, when you walk into your house, let's just take the house for an example. If you walk into a room where the lights turn on or off automatically based on a motion detector, that would say be one sensor. If you've got a smart watch that's monitoring your health, or your daily activity, that would be another type of sensor. So when my colleague spoke of 500 billion sensors, those are sensors on specific identifiable items, whether it's articles of clothing, whether it's a package, whatever the particular item is. And so all of that information gets collected and then it gets transferred via the superhighway, which is 5G. And so the issue becomes, what do we do with all that information? Now, on the one hand, proponents of the Internet of Things, because the information can come from your, at times, you can control your refrigerator, your washing machine, your coffee maker, your garage door, all these things, all to your phone with your app. So proponents of the say that by collecting all this information, it will make our lives so much more convenient because we'll be able to centrally manage that our world around us, whether it comes to our household items or if we were at work, say in the industrial society, as my colleague pointed out, just-in-time types of transportation to make transportation more efficient. More importantly, when we look at the example of what they have with Amazon, they've attached tracking devices to employees and timed their efficiency as they move about collecting items that we order on Amazon to see their work efficiency, to follow their workflows. So on the one hand, proponents of the Internet of Things, because of this increased capacity to transfer information from point A to point B through 5G, say that our lives are going to be easier, that it'll be more convenient, and that we will, advance the society. And all of that is true. And on that point, combining the Internet of Things and 5G for our entrepreneurs out there, the real value is the following with the Internet of Things. Given our increased capacity with 5G, the real value is going to be in where you find the information that indeed will provide a service that makes someone else's lives easier, or industry more efficient, or cities more efficient. When you can collect that information through the various sensors, depending on where you put them, be it under manhole covers to help control traffic, or be it on snow plows so that you can more quickly map the most efficient route for them to clean up the streets after a snowstorm. Wherever you can place sensors to collect that information to save time, money, energy, manpower, and deliver that information in a way that people didn't have it before, that's the value of the Internet of Things. That's where you're going to make the money. That's where entrepreneurs should be looking. Ought to be looking to fill the niche of those areas where there is value added for the information, or the information that we currently can collect, and making that faster, more concise, more detailed, and more specific. The value is in collecting the information, which is the Internet of Things, and transferring it on the superhighway, which is 5G. And so that's the really exciting point and part of the Internet of Things and 5G. Now, there is a downside because there's always a pro and there's always a con. The collection of all this information raises very, very serious concerns about data privacy or privacy in general. Because if somebody can monitor you, it echoes some of the things that we've already gone through. So everybody has a smartphone and things of that nature. But the question becomes, what happens if somebody can actually monitor just about everything that you do? And an example of this would be a movie from some time ago that I happen to find quite funny. But now in today's age, it is in fact quite real with the specter of 500 billion sensors. And that movie was Ed TV with Matthew McConaughey, when essentially the plot was that you had a main character, the protagonist, who was followed around with a television camera 24 hours a day, every waking moment or sleeping moment of his life. And that camera was essentially collecting information. Now imagine if that information was collected digitally, and you simply forgot about it. It's one thing to have a camera in your face so that you know and it's there and it's present. It's another thing to have this kind of passive collection of information on everything that you do. And if you have the prospect of hackers, which we've seen more recently with ransomware attacks and things of that nature, people with malintent that come in and collect that information, what would they do with that information and how would that affect your life? So on the one hand, just as an opening, finding the value through the sensors of new information to make things more efficient or lives easier and provide that to consumers in a way that they had not known before or save some time and money, that's the value. That's the proposition. That's the upside. The downside is the collection of all that same information falling into the wrong hands and being used with malintent. So it's an exciting world out there, but it's one that we can't run away from because we're fast on our way. Dr.
Thank
Sharif?
you. Thank you, Dr. William. Mr. Den. Mr. Den.
Yeah. Okay. Little latency there on the unmute. Yeah. What I think that was like 40 milliseconds there. Have to get 6G going. No. In case people don't know what G stands for, we should say it stands for generation, because technology tends to happen in the same way. We have generations that have identifiable aspects. You know, we have the greatest generation that won World War II, the baby boomer generation that I'm part of. We have the Generation X. So there are development cycles that happen in civilization. And I think what is actually happening is the development cycles of technology are getting out in front of the development cycles of civilization. And we need to reconverge those two things. You know, you could call it the Internet of Things, but it could also be called the Internet of Threats, because there are so many ways that all this ubiquitous computing can be hacked into by people that, you know, maybe they're just doing it for sport. That was the original hacker ethic, as you just did something to prove it was possible to do. You weren't necessarily trying to disrupt society or civilization. But unfortunately now there are a lot more people that are in the what are called black hat hackers, where they're trying to penetrate the systems of society. I would like to see the Internet of humane civilization, because there is such a big digital divide right now, you know, between the developed world and the developing world. It's really incumbent on those that have access to these technologies to use them for maximal good for the entire human civilization. You know, another thing that we get in trouble with is we become too dependent on systems that are not as robust as they could or should be. They're single points of failure. You know, right now we have the electric grid is probably the biggest single point of failure for civilization, because everything we do that keeps our civilization going depends on cheap, ubiquitous, 24-hour, always-on power. People aren't prepared, you know, to survive if that should go down for an extended period of time. So I would just say, before we get too enamored with the, you know, amazingness of the Internet of Things, 5G, edge computing, let's use this for preparedness, for robustness, for resilience in our society, and let's take care of the people that don't have access to it as much as possible. You know, that's what I'll say about that. But edge computing, I think, has a kind of interesting analog. If you think of edge computing as kind of load balancing, when you're running, if you're coaching a sports team and you've got a star player, you don't want to play that player until he can't play anymore. You want to load balance. You want to save him, you know, maybe play him a little in the first quarter and then some at the last quarter. So you've figured out what he can do to win the game for you. So edge computing also is similar to what's called technology inversion. It used to be that a satellite phone was the size of a brick, and it cost $1 a minute to make a call, because the satellite platforms 100 miles up, or actually in geosynchronous orbit to 22,000 miles up. That's the orbit that stays parked over the same spot of the Earth as the Earth turns. That's how high you have to go to. That's where all the communication satellites are. So as those antennas in the Clark belt, named after Arthur C. Clarke, who actually envisioned it in science fiction decades and decades before it actually happened in reality, as those antennas became larger, the devices that would talk to them became smaller and smaller. In fact, the new generation of Apple smartphones is rumored to be including satellite communication capability. So that's the idea of technology inversion, and it kind of relates into load balancing and edge computing, because that's how you get greater and greater efficiencies in your technological deployment. So yeah, just don't be too enamored with these technological developments. Let's share them. Let's anticipate the threats, and let's make the best use of them civilization wide. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, actually, our audience has few questions. I want to take one question for you. This is from Onika Shams. What are the major benefit of edge computing?
Thank you, Sharif. Well, I think one of the most remarkable things about the majority of the human race is how adaptable we are, how we can adjust to new ways of doing things, of working, living, of connecting with others. And it feels like the human race has endured much change from industrial revolution in the 19th century all the way up to now. And in the most recent decades in particular, where we all witnessed exponential development of computing and devices. So, of course, the Internet of Things, 5G and edge computing. And so, of course, it's these emerging ideas that have been in the public consciousness for some time now, and it's something that is quite familiar to people, especially people like us who have an interest in these kinds of things, or people who are involved in the industry, be it manufacturing or teaching. I don't think the Internet of Things has reached the super mainstream yet. By super mainstream, I mean everyone in every generation, in every country, in every class, from poverty to the super rich. And I certainly think the smartphone has reached that level of universality and ubiquity. Specifically, the smartphone in the palm of one's hand is now a universal symbol of modern man and woman. And I would even go so far to say that the smartphone in the hand has now become something of an archetype. And what I mean is, if new technologies, like what we were talking about, are to be introduced successfully into the mainstream or into the public consciousness around the world, it can't be done too quickly. It has to be done incrementally. I mean, I'll give you an example, and then I'll come back to the question. I remember when Google Glasses first caused a stir, and there were reports of people wearing the glasses being met with outrage from other members of the public in shops out in the street. I think I remember one incident in particular happening in McDonald's. And because these people were worried about being filmed, that their privacy was being breached and that their identity and personal space in both real space and cyberspace were being encroached on and compromised. However, as we can all see now, very shortly after that, members of the public don't think twice about whipping out their smartphones en masse if an incident starts to happen in front of them, where someone was lucky enough to be caught in some humiliating, embarrassing, or transgressive incident, and then had to have it recorded and immortalized on the internet forever, more for all to see. So what I mean is, every technology seems to be met with some level of distrust. I think lots of innovations are quite divisive. They elicit either strong feelings, or one swings over to Luddism, and someone else swings over to, messianic singularitarianism. So the morality and ethics of technology is a whole world of interest and intrigue unto itself, and the Internet of Things is no different. People are now so worried about their privacy in the face of developments like what Dr. Trezevant Wright pointed out. But you will find these people expressing such concerns in a Starbucks using cafe Wi-Fi on their smartphone, and you'll surely get lots of likes and heart reactions from their friends on their own smartphones. So there's no stopping it, really. The past couple of years and decades witnessed continuous shrinking and portabilization of devices that started off being the size of several rooms, including the corridors, and so it will continue. We're not going to come to a halt as we go down this avenue. Devices will get smaller and smaller. And eventually, they will be in our clothes, utilities, in our bodies, organs, and bloodstreams too, even. So I totally understand people's concerns with Internet of Things and ubiquitous micro and nanotechnology. But to try and answer the question originally, I find myself feeling some level of support for at least some level of surveillance and security, because we know that some people are capable of how much suffering can happen at the hands of so many people. So if an infrastructure is constructed where there is a more widespread magnitude of security and surveillance, that helps human civilization's preventative measures where crime and suffering are concerned. I must admit to feeling some level of support, but of course other parts of me disagree with these other parts of me. So that's one of the downsides of being interested in morals and ethics. So I think, as someone who is very concerned about the level of, well, I'm sure we all are, but you know what I mean, about the level of suffering in the world, and how people inhabit some kind of a grey space where morals and ethics are concerned, at the level of security and surveillance possible, whilst can be troubling and controversial, if that helps in a preventative way, lots of crimes being done to each other, I think that's a definite advantage. So sorry to answer the question in a bit of a roundabout way, but I hope I managed to. But yeah, thank you, Sharif. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald, today, Dr. William, you want to add some point?
Well, yeah, actually, it's just a slight thing, but yes, and I'll be real quick. On the issue of whether or not there's a medical effect, I mean, I'm not in a position to know. I'm not necessarily I'm not a medical doctor. However, what I can say is that the end result of all this information, whether it's collected from the sensors, put it on the superhighway, it arrives with us, and the issue then becomes how we go about using that information. And so in a sense, we're changing our design thought process because we get this information that maybe we didn't have before. And that causes us to rethink how we receive the information, how we utilize it, and then where we move. Sometimes it makes the information faster. The advent of new information that we didn't have before allows us to redesign our processes, whether it's production process, whether it's how we go about our daily lives, what we think about, what we do first, and what's done for us. So in that regard, if you consider how you go about thinking about your life as a rewiring of your thought process, it certainly has an effect. Doctor?
Thank you. Professor Donald, actually today is Malaysian 64 Independence Day. So happy Merdeka. So that's why we are sharing some views from Malaysia, like our KLCCs and some of the natural beauties. So it's really, really very beautiful place. I really love Malaysia. I have a full respect for Malaysia, and I want to invite all of our guests and speakers in Malaysia. Maybe soon we can arrange an offline conference and everybody can fly and they can come to Malaysia. Especially I know Dr. Donald's actually the Professor Donald want to come to Malaysia and he want to visit.
Okay, while we're waiting for Donald, I did have some questions. I mean, Adam, I was really intrigued by what you talked about with the moral and ethics. Could you elaborate more on that? Because and Dan, I appreciate the notion of privacy and hacking with malintent. And I think, and I'd like to hear more from you, Dan, on the hacking, and Adam from you on what the implications are morally and ethically. Because Dan, you mentioned that before hacking was for fun. Now it could be for any kind of nefarious things. So Adam, don't mind me. I'm sorry, Dr. Sharif. But Adam, I'm really curious about the moral and ethical stuff. And Dan, I'm really curious about, your notions of privacy. So Adam, please, because I do want to learn. You have to unmute, Adam. Okay, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to tell Adam he's...
You first, Dan. You first. If you want to go first.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's kind of ironic that most of those original generation of the 1G hackers are now mostly employed as pen testers or penetration testers or security consultants, making very tidy sums for companies. And what came out of the hacker world, the 1G hackers gave us the cryptographic innovations of blockchain and distributed autonomous organizations, cryptocurrency. This whole digital cash thing had been bouncing around for almost decades before it became realizable. Given the right kinds of networks and such. But yeah, I mean, I think we all have to almost become our own kind of James Bond nowadays, because there's so much innovation that is in so many hands that are questionable. You can't really let up. I mean, it's kind of we have a republic in America, and Ben Franklin told us if we could keep it, and how we need to keep it is by being educated and involved and civically engaged. And the same is true for the Republic of Technology. If we don't want to be overwhelmed by the bad effects of hyper accelerating technology, we have to be hyper vigilant. What's the I mean, you can trade security. You can trade your freedom for security, but in the end, you'll lose both. Is one precaution on that. But yeah, I think there's good things with on the horizon with the hacking threat, though, because we have biometric identification. You know, most of the hacking, the bad hacking that goes on, is identity spoofing, identity theft. But there are some very good technologies for using biometric markers and things like unique QR codes that can only be would be almost impossible to spoof. You know, you send this thing back. Just even your face in the right time window and a technological exchange can act as this kind of anti-hacking thing. But yeah, we could do a whole episode on the hacker world. I don't want to get too far afield on that, but those are some thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. Professor Donald, you want to add some point, because we are discussing on some of the ethical point, but I have a specific question from audience, because Ali Rice, are there any health implications with 5G? Why has not there been any consultation on the rollout? Is technology and the technocracy creating demand rather than the consumer?
Well, the first question is about health, and it's a bit, there's no logical reason why it would cause health problems. I mean, it's basically the same technologies you use on routers. It's just radio waves going through the air, and we're subject to that from natural causes. There's cosmic rays, and we've been living in a world of radio waves for many generations now. And there's overall, most cancers are going down a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit more of a problem with diet and other things than it is with, there's no evidence whatsoever. And it has been studied carefully for a long time. So I don't understand where that idea even came from. But, you know, if anything that you don't know quite what it is can be a problem. What was the other question you asked?
There are more questions that why has not there been any consultation on the rollout? Like,
well,
yes.
There has been. I mean, you can go to any city council meeting everywhere, and there's people that are, you know, just rows of people with tinfoil hats talking about how the radio waves are going to get in their brain. And I mean, the whole thing, when you talked about people were talking about the idea that you were injected, Bill Gates was going to inject you with a chip when you got your vaccine. Well, that's an IoT device. And so it's been one of the biggest problems for the rollout. And that's what I said in the beginning. Maybe it's better in an autocratic society than in a democracy. Every person who has different kinds of fears can be able to block it. And so there's been extensive consultation. And
can I just add to that? You know, there actually is a condition that a lot of people, well, a certain amount of people experience called hyper radio sensitivity, and these people have to live in a place called the National Radio Quiet Zone in Green Bank, West Virginia, in the U.S. It's also where there's a lot of radio astronomy telescopes, but it's still being studied. It's a unknown, you know, causal mechanism or etiology of what's taking place. But, you know, I would also say that some of the physiological effect standards that are pretty outdated, because they just have to do with thermal heating of the skin from radio exposure, and that's a pretty gross level effect to base your safety data on. So I mean, we know that our cells operate at micro, you know, millionth of a volt potentials when they move ions in and out of the calcium channels and sodium channels. So these things are not. It's not a settled argument, and it's actually a very contentious argument because maybe there is a certain amount of misinformation out there, but there's also a certain amount of studies that aren't being pursued strongly enough. So I would just say don't write all this off as tinfoil hatism, and actually that's a Faraday cage. When you make a metal shield around something, they've protected the device from electromagnetic pulses and such. So like most myths, there's a quasi basis in fact, but I'm just putting in my 2 cents on that topic. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, I just wanted to explain a little bit about where I was coming from and from the Dr. Chisholm. I think I'll try and explain this without coming across as crazy. I think one of the main attractors for innovation and technological development is towards an ideal where suffering is controlled, and I think I would describe it as the all-encompassing master goal I think humanity should strive for, and where suffering is, if not abolished completely, then controlled, limited, minimized, and then maybe eventually abolished throughout the living world completely, and then as we go to other planets. And so I orient towards a transhumanist framework, specifically a bioethics suffering abolitionism one. And I think the master goal for humanity and our technological ingenuity should be a suffering-focused framework. And I think humans are the planet's best bet. We have the sapience, the sentience, enough sapience and sentience to use our own ingenuity to not only pull ourselves out of the abyss of nature in all her redness and tooth and claw, but also for the rest of nature as well, which is still a far out idea. And I think the main roadblocks are cultural and sociological. Could you argue that we have the technical means already, but people are still stuck within quite ingrained biases. And suffering abolitionism is peppered with ethical questions and things that could go wrong. And of course, as the proverb says, hell is paved with good intentions. And having or wanting to have some kind of stewardship over the living world to prevent suffering is, I think, there could be the greatest good intention. So could that take us to the worst hell on that principle? Well, I hope not. So to have some kind of quasi-godlike benevolent dictatorship, the Internet of Things is a promising first step, a promising first increment. And as we go more miniaturized, we can eventually get to Internet of Plants, Internet of Trees, Internet of Animals, and then this technology is that we're talking about could bring us heaven on earth. I know it sounds a bit far out, but that's it's
excellent. This is actually
sorry.
Yeah, definitely. This is actually excellent discussions, and we are getting a very good, interesting insight from the industry. So I want to go for the concluding remarks for today, but before that, I just want to add, actually, World Talent Economy Forums we are developing as a think tank. We have our honorable board of advisors and other things, and we are very, very careful about transparency. We are very careful about human contributions. Example, Professor Donald actually writing our constitutions and other important point. I think that every week 2 or 3 times I actually push him, I call him, and I request him what the area we can improve, what the area we can contribute, what area we can, and Professor Donald also doing very hard work. Besides that, we have our honorable board of advisors and our ambassadors. We are developing a scientific committee because we love to be more focused on research. So the corporations and universities, those who want to collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum, we love to do more research because I believe that we need more solutions, especially developing nations need more solutions. So those who are interested, so they can communicate with us. And another thing is that technology innovations are also happening in first world, in the developed nations. So if you have a strategy, if you have idea how we can collaborate with the collaboration or with Mantissa College in Malaysia and Paris Graduate Schools in Paris, we are launching our educational activities. In Bangladesh, we are engaging with few largest group of organization in India. We are collaborating with 1 million students. So we are actually step by step, we are improving, but we need more intellectual contributions. Yes, we have 695 university as a partner, but our major priority, those who are working as our board of advisors and our our mentors, those who can contribute more for global communities. And any point, if you have questions, if you have anything, you directly can communicate with us. We have our office in Subang Malaysia. Beside that, we have our office in Kuala Lumpur and the Paris, and we are open for developing more partnerships and other things, because individually I am nothing, I cannot solve anything, but as a team, if we work together, if we move as a team, maybe we can solve many problems. And for that particular issues, I'm very young, but I have at least 14 years of my career I'm developing in academy. And you can check, I want to make 100% transparent everything's. uh, yes, we have religious point of view, but it does not means that uh, we are fundamentalist. No, we are very open minded. I every day I enjoy when all of our speaker discussing modern science, modern engineering and technology. And I believe personally that education is the key. Always I believe that it can actually solve maximum problem. If you can educate nations, this is enough. You do not have to give them donation, you do not have to give them protections, you do not have to give them anything, but try to give them proper education. So I think Professor Donald, you are taking one of the big responsibility. I'm waiting for your work. Beside that, Mr. Dan, Mr. Adam, you also doing fantastic work. Dr. William, after a long time, you back in World Talent Economy Forum. I know intellectually you are very sharp. Even we have our more than 50 board of advisor, those who will be the part of our scientific committee. We are heavily communicating with the research organizations. Any good idea, we are open for implementing. But another things, transparency is our objective. Sometimes I feel very bad. Day and night we are working. I do not know how do you know our life. Actually, last uh, 3 years, never I take any vacation. 7 days a week I do hard work because of launching any university, engaging with the students, and when I'm taking a position, so I have to fulfill these things. Now is a good time, and we need dialogue. We need more dialogue. We need more open mind. We need more innovations. And I know there is a many good people around the world like you. If you contribute for the global communities, I'm sure it will be change. And one thing, until my death, I can confirm that transparency, honesty, and excellency. This is my motto. Everything will be transparent. Everything will be very, very open. So whatever World Talent Economy Forum doing, we have our registered company from 2017. We have our all of the necessary backdrop, and I build up some successful university, then I come to the discussion. Why I discussing too much? Because sometimes when people again and again creating a lot of questions, so I feel in that way that I need to discuss more, I need to open up more. uh, so I want to welcome you, everyone in Malaysia, when everything open. And definitely modern science, modern engineering, and modern technology is ultimately way of solutions. So as a think tank, as a good organizations, I believe if we contribute as a team, not like example, I'm also transhumanist, but I believe in team, I believe in family concept, I believe in society concept. So yes, if we as a social being, if we just change educational strategy, if we just change some people's like knowledge and different point of view, then ultimately they will change their society. So that's why I always said I do not want to be leader. I'm creating communities, creating ecosystem for leaders, for talents like Professor Donald, Dr. William, Mr. Adam, Mr. Dan. You are the leaders. I'm just working for creating better communities. So hopefully we will get more interesting idea, interesting thoughts, and we will work as a team. I know sometimes we have argument, sometimes we have discussion, sometimes you have, but I know everybody has brilliant attitude. That's why they come to the internet, they are discussing, they are sharing their views, because all of you have good intention, all of you are a good leaders. So this society, these developing nations need you. Thank you for all of your support. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor Donald, then Mr. Dan, then Mr. Adam, and finally Dr. William. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks? And if you share some of the views how we can develop even better think tank and better education institutions, and we can create more opportunity for global goods.
Well, for the last thing, I think the back and forth we're doing is being very useful, and we should probably do that a little bit more before I talk about it on the show. I really want to echo something that other people have said. I've been often on this show, I've talked about the issue of what artificial intelligence actually does. And artificial intelligence, deep learning, for instance, is not intelligent in any way. What it does, what happens is that you manage to train the machines basically to recognize things based on an average of a whole incredible lot of data. And right now, one of the things that happened was that they trained it on white people's faces, and then the statistical, basically when it looked at somebody of people of color, it was statistically aberrant. And so that was causing facial recognition software to mark people as being somehow dangerous or problematic, simply because of the fact that we do everything's done by averages. And that can be very useful because, say, for instance, an airplane, the new Airbuses have about 10,000 sensors, 1,000 sensors in each wing. And in a case like that, you really want to make sure that things aren't deviating from a norm. You know, as soon as it starts deviating from a norm, you have something to worry about. The thing that was brought up about Amazon, to me, that sounds kind of awful, really. I mean, the idea that they have sensors on you that can tell if you space out or take a break or anything else like that is counter to how human beings really actually learn and work and various other kinds of things. It's trying to turn people into robots. And that's why Amazon has such incredible turnover in those warehouses, because people just can't take it. And so I think that's an example of a case where the IoT is being used in ways that we really have to learn a lot more about human behavior before we start messing with stuff like that. But overall, there's just so much fun stuff that can be done. One thing is important is the power, because the devices, if they're going to broadcast, have to have power to do it. So the little RFID tags are so incredibly low power. But just, now everybody's checking themselves, or not everybody, but a lot of people are checking themselves out of the grocery store themselves, and they're getting rid of tellers. That's been that way in a lot of Europe for years. And once we have RFID tags on everything, we can just basically push our shopping cart through the sensors, and it'll know everything in our shopping cart and exactly how much everything costs. So we're heading towards some very valuable things and also some very dangerous things. So that's what I'm going to say. If you have a chance to start from scratch, I'd suggest that you really, really think about the effect that it has on human lives. Okay.
Yeah. Excellent, Professor Donald. Mr. Dan.
Boy, I loved your statement there that you gave there, Sharif, about being transparent and having integrity. I mean, I think that sums up the mission that civilization needs to tackle. One of my favorite Enlightenment authors is Tom Paine, and he said, "The world is my country, doing good is my religion." That's embodied in the spirit of open societies and mentorship and taking care of each other. I'm a big believer in amateur radio as a worldwide force for doing good. These are people that when there's hurricanes, they get aid in. They're technologically savvy. I think we need a universal auxiliary language. I'm a big booster of Esperanto, although it never quite caught on in the way it was envisioned. But it makes learning languages easier, and it makes translating languages very much more error-free. So I would just say become civically engaged. If you're not voting, vote. If you are voting, think about running for something. I'm going to run for city council again in 2022 here in California, and I just really appreciate getting to be participating with all these great, distinguished minds. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. What's your concluding remarks today?
Thank you, Sharif. Well, I just wanted to say we are living in such an incredibly exciting period of time. I'm glad Arthur C. Clarke was mentioned earlier. We probably all know one of his oft-quoted sayings: advanced technology can be indistinguishable from magic. So to avoid getting despondent over all this COVID situations or 5G or vaccines or this or that, just think this is a great privilege to be alive right now whilst all this is going on. Now, I like to think that many great men and women of the past are quite jealous of all of us to experience all this with our own two eyes. I feel like I didn't really answer those two questions as deeply as I could have done earlier, so feel free to send me messages or connect with me so I can explain further some of the subjects we spoke about today. I love debates and discussions and opposing ideas even. It's like a game of chess, it's an intellectual stimulation. It's something I would definitely like to be more skillful in: rhetoric, public speaking, debating. And I hope my support for security and surveillance didn't seem too punitive and excessive earlier. And Professor Donald raised a good point that punitive measures like that risk roboticizing human beings. We do need the necessary values and equivalent wisdom to not get drunk on the power all this technology could afford people at the top watching us. It's Ben Franklin's panopticon. Again, it's an excellent preventative measure to prevent chaos and discord, but it is also a soul-destroying one. So we need to be careful, I think. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Dr. William, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, actually, I want to pick up on a couple of things. First, I began with just a general notion of, the Internet of Things and 5G, and I just want to reiterate that, and that's that the ultimate goal of the Internet of Things from a business standpoint is finding the monetary value in the movement of information, new information, or reorganized more efficiently of the information that we already have in the fastest possible way, being 5G. But it's also true that during this discussion, some interesting points were raised, and I want to highlight those. First, we touched upon the notion of privacy, and that is important. And that could be a series of discussions because it just touches upon all kinds of different issues. And as Adam raised, there are moral and ethical questions. And as Dan raised, there are a number of different ways it's done, why it's being done, and questions that need to be asked. But more importantly, what both Dan and you, Dr. Sharif, raised was this notion of the digital divide. And right now, it seems to me, and if I might just add something different, and that is that right now we're having this discussion, and it's really a first world problem because all of this information is technology for those people that can afford it. And yet, one of the lessons that we have from this, from the vaccine rollout of the COVID vaccines across the globe, is that some nations it's done faster, and other nations are severely lagging behind. And we could call that a medical divide. The internet or IoT and 5G is a digital divide. And you can see the divide. It's clear, whether it's economically, medically, or in terms of the digital divide. And that raises this question. And it's what Dan raised. And Dan, I was really interested in, if you don't mind if I can borrow it, it's the internet of human civilization. I thought that was really amazing in terms of how you think about it. And that combined, Adam, with how you talked about defining the parameters of society, which I think is what you're really getting at, that this whole Internet of Things allows us to define this entirely new world, and it's wide open, and it can be defined anywhere. I don't necessarily agree with the idea that it has to be authoritarian to begin with, although that's for another discussion. But the combination, Dan, of the internet of human civilization combined with Adam's notion of how we are planning it, then we come back to the Internet of Things. It's the collection of all this new information, the reorganization of the existing information that we have in a more efficient way. That's going to provide the value. The 5G is going to deliver it. Adam and Dan are going to help guide us in terms of how we apply it, but we have to be cognizant of the impact on privacy and how we spread it out. And that leads me to this final point that I just want to add for the audience, and that's this notion. The value outside, in terms of moving and bridging this digital divide, is a very simple kind of concept. There's a book called Aravan, and the story of how they, in India, how one doctor brought medical treatments with regard to glaucoma to the mass population in India. And it's used as a business example at most programs, MBA programs. But essentially, the concept is to provide high quality, whatever product or service you're providing, for low cost. Now, given a digital divide and given IoT and 5G, if we've got the digital divide and we've got a marketplace of billions of people out there that want to have access to the Internet of Things and 5G, if an entrepreneur finds that niche where they can provide that service for high quality service for low cost, that will not only reward them financially, but also help us bridge the digital divide so that we can get into the collective discussion on the issues that Dan and Adam raised. So with that in mind, there are infinite possibilities. Hey, Mark, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Infinite possibilities, a bright future, but there's also a dark side. And right now, the beauty is that we're writing it as we speak. And Dr. Sharif, as you said, everybody is welcomed. Everybody is a contributor. And this is what the internet allows us to do, to share all of our independent voices. And for that, I'm just thankful that you have me back again. So with that, I bid adieu. Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our friend, Mr. Markley. What is your concluding remarks for today? Because, yeah.
It's always great to pop in here. Sorry I popped in so late, but 1,001 things going on in my life. I just finished doing last week a lovely business expo that was in our African American community. So I did that with my friend, Dr. Eric Kelly. So we had people that were doing all kinds of things, even in this digital space. So one of the people is actually building he's got a company called Suede Soul or something like that, but he's building like an entire Wakanda nation over there in the Bahama area that will have a lot of this digital kind of things going on. There was another young lady, Kimberly Seward, who is part of a virtual mall that is being created that is African American run. So she is doing that out of all places, Indiana. So she's doing some great work in that regards. And she actually gave a display last week and showed us how the mall looked. And instead of the kind of malls that are out there now, they can be very plastic and very stale because it is digital. It was very warm. So you could even have a big art painting like you would in your house up on the wall that could picture a great artist or an artist of the community. And of course, you could go into the various stores and look at the shoes, look at the clothes, look at a variety of other things. There was even a car display room that even Bill would have been impressed with as well, because they was literally showing the fancy cars and things of that nature. So it was just really fantastic looking at that great virtual mall and checking out what she was doing in this digital space. And I know that I've had the pleasure of talking a couple of times to my good buddy, Adrian Martinica, who has a thing called Technology for the Future, where he's trying to make sure that we are facing the digital divide and providing computers and laptops to people around the world. He's actually currently based in Canada, because even in the world of the digital divide, you can get caught up in the politics. So unfortunately, he is while he was supplying kids these great computers and was doing it out of North Carolina, and he's of Slavic background. While he was doing that, he and his sister, who founded this company, had forgot something very basic, like filling out your paperwork. So when they got to the border and we're going to Canada actually was like, nope, we got to arrest you because you don't have your citizenship papers together. So he is actually stuck in Canada right now. And he's trying to still run his company, which is providing these great computers to people, but also trying to work on the immigration issue as well. So, Bill, he might need your services. I'll get you in touch with him and everything. So he might need your services and all of that. But definitely that is something that's going on just in that digital divide space. But, you know, one of the things that I've become a big time fan of, and I think that I've definitely mentioned to you, Sharif, and I might have mentioned it one time to Donald, who I've had the pleasure of being in this room with and everything, is I've become a big fan of Clubhouse. And we're seeing a lot of people that are using Clubhouse as a way to actually get their word out in whatever space they're in. There have been some amazing people that I have met in the world of entertainment, whether that's music or whether that's puppetry or whether that's a number of other kinds of the creative fields. But there have been some also tech giants that I have met as well. Some of them I probably never would have met before we got into this kind of democracy of commentation that goes on in programs like Clubhouse and programs like Discord, in places like Facebook and things of that nature. So while we complain oftentimes about the negative impacts of what some of those groups are, there is some serious networking that goes on in those communities as well. So definitely that's some of my thoughts about the digital situation. And I do agree that there is a digital divide, and we do have some parts of the country that don't have the kind of access that they should. And some of that is very basic access. I know that when I had Adrian on one of my podcasts, he was talking about the fact that, you know, don't rule out even simple things like dial-up. Like I said, he was providing pretty good laptops in the sense of them being, I want to say, refurbished ones to the kids, but he has given tens of thousands around the world and around particularly the United States to make sure that kids in these urban areas, as well as kids in the rural areas that are not having that kind of access, have access. And he's still doing this work even as he faces his immigration issues as well. So definitely that is some of my thoughts. And if anybody wants to find me, they can definitely look for me on Clubhouse or any of those other kinds of rooms. And I see that in the chat, one of our panelists has put his Clubhouse room in there, or his Clubhouse methodology. So I would definitely reach out to him. Who knows? I might even find Bill on Clubhouse as well. But definitely that's some of my conversation, some of my thoughts. But I do know that we've got to find a way to get people engaged and make sure that they have all of the proper equipment. Because I can tell you that running an entire conference on this one laptop that I'm now talking to y'all from with my one backup computer, and I was the main engineer, it can be a challenge. Just to leave it at that. And I'll leave it on that note.
Thank you. This is actually excellent discussions. We want this kind of platform, like where many brilliant people, talent people, they're joining, they're discussing, they're sharing their views. That is the beauty. That's why I really love the global communities. I really love this culture that we are actually understanding each other's through modern science, through modern engineering. We are very much logical. We are very much friendly. So at the end of the day, there is a good outcome. So thank you everyone for this brilliant discussion. Thank you, Professor Donalds, Mr. Dan, my honorable friend, Mr. Markley, Mr. Adam, and Dr. William for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Professor Donalds, we are waiting for your concept, how we can work together, how we can do more focus on research. Trust me, I saw that in the developing nation, there are many corporations, they need research, but they do not have right kind of resources. Maybe we have right now. I'm very much happy that we have right kind of resources. Resource is very important. Human resource is very important. Talent is very important. If we work together, if we find out the problem, I am sure this human can find out the solution. And definitely through this process, I think we can solve many problems. So education is the key. Let's focus on education and let's contribute through our projects. I'm sure you will be part of the history for this global community. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.